I spent the entire night sewing my daughter's wedding gown, stitch by painful stitch, without once resting my eyes. Each pass of the needle carried a memory. Every thread held a promise. The clock's steady tick-tock was my only companion until dawn, marking the hours like the echo of a life slowly unraveling. When I finally finished, the first light of morning spilled through the window and fell on the white fabric. It was beautiful. Not the sparkle of Fifth Avenue boutiques, not the price tag of a famous designer, but crafted with the quiet, enduring love of a mother who, even after a lifetime of sacrifices, still believed that care could heal anything. I carried the gown with trembling hands, wrapped in an old sheet to protect it. When I reached my daughter Zuri's home, she was surrounded by friends, laughing and sipping coffee from delicate cups. She looked like one of those perfect, untouchable Hollywood socialites. For a moment, pride swelled in me, and then it shattered. Zuri looked up, scanned me from head to toe, and asked, "Is that the dress?" I nodded, smiling, and unwrapped the fabric carefully, as though revealing a treasure. She glanced at it for only a few seconds. Then, with a sneer that cut deeper than any knife, she let it fly. "This looks like something a poor person would wear." Her friends giggled. Before I could speak, she snatched the gown and tossed it into the trash. "I'm not getting married dressed like a seamstress, Mom." The air seemed to abandon my lungs. I didn't speak, not a single word. I gathered my broken pride from the floor and walked away slowly before anyone could see my tears. The sun beat down mercilessly, but I felt only cold. The gown haunted my thoughts, every stitch burning like an open wound. I thought of the sleepless nights, the years at the old sewing machine my mother had left me, the calluses on my hands, the countless sacrifices I had made so Zuri could reach her place in the world. And I wondered, when did love become a source of shame? When I returned home, I sat in front of my sewing machine. I stared at it for a long time. Its familiar whirring now sounded like a lament. I touched the pedal, seeking comfort in its vibration, and felt something stir, a strange, sharp impulse. Not sadness, something new, a cold, dangerous calm, the kind of calm that only arrives when a heart breaks and, instead of shattering, begins to plot. Days passed. My daughter never called, not even to apologize. I heard through whispers that her designer gown had arrived from Paris. Perfect, just as she demanded. But perfection has no soul, and that designer dress, no matter how flawless, could never tell her story. One afternoon I went to her house. I waited until she left and slipped inside silently. The scent of expensive perfume and fresh flowers hung in the air, but in the corner the trash can still sat. And inside, among crumpled papers and discarded scraps of fabric, I found my dress, wrinkled, stained, humiliated, but whole, just like me. I pulled it out gently, hugging it to my chest, and carried it home. I spread it across my work table, letting the sunset light fall on its folds. Even in its misery, it was beautiful, like a mother who continues to love despite being wounded. My fingers traced the seams, and I felt my love still alive in every thread. Then I knew that dress would never end up in the garbage. For nights that followed, I locked myself in my studio. Sleep abandoned me. Food was irrelevant. I sewed. I embroidered crystal, flowers along the hem layered, vintage lace, and with every stitch, I hid more than decoration. I hid my history. One stitch for every tear. I had shed one thread for every sacrifice. One flower for every day. I had felt invisible. As the dress transformed, so did I. I was no longer the submissive mother bowed under her daughter's contempt. I was a woman who understood that love does not mean enduring everything. It means choosing what is worth keeping. When I finished, the mirror reflected someone new. My eyes no longer carried sadness, but fire. The gown sparkled beneath the studio lamp, and its brilliance held something beyond beauty. It held justice. On the wedding day, I hadn't planned to attend, but destiny, or perhaps self-respect, guided me. I wore a simple cream dress, pinned up my hair, and stepped out with purpose. Each step was a heartbeat reclaimed, every breath a silent declaration. I am not the same. When I arrived at the Grand Magnolia Ballroom in Charlotte, the air was alive with music and laughter, lights shimmering off crystal chandeliers, flowers in full bloom, and the soft clinking of champagne glasses. Zuri, radiant in her luxurious imported lace gown, was beautiful, yes, but empty. She didn't see me enter, and I didn't want her to notice me just yet. I lingered near the door, observing silently. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of what was about to unfold. That night, my daughter wouldn't just have a wedding. She was about to receive a lesson. When the clock struck 10, I took the first step toward the center of the room. A hush fell. Every eye turned toward me. Zuri looked up. Her smile vanished. And in that instant, I understood. Destiny had been preparing me for this moment my entire life. Because sometimes, a mother's love is shown not through tears, but through a gown that shines brighter than shame. Needles have always been my companions. Since I was 12, when my mother first taught me to sew a button, I knew that my hands would speak what my voice could not. I was never a woman of easy words, but my fingers could tell stories. And for decades, among threads, fabrics, and silence, I learned that every seam could carry a life, even a soul. When I became a widow, Zuri was only 6. My husband Kofi had died in a construction accident, leaving me alone with a little girl and a single sewing machine. That first night, I cried by the window, the apartment dark and quiet. But by morning I turned on the machine, wiped away my tears, and began to sew. From that moment, every garment I created carried a promise. I would never let my daughter go hungry. We lived in a tiny apartment behind the neighborhood tailor shop where I worked. Zuri slept on a little cot, surrounded by scraps of fabric she sometimes transformed into dolls. I watched her play, hoping that one day all our sacrifices would make sense. That one day she would understand that love could be embroidered. For years, my fingers bled over the silk, gowns and veils of women who could afford what I never could. As I stitched for strangers, I imagined Zuri's wedding. I dreamed of sewing her the most beautiful gown in the world, not perfect, but woven with the one thing I had never lacked: love. When Zuri turned 15, I managed to buy her a brand new dress. No hand-me-downs, no patches. Sky blue with a white ribbon I embroidered on the chest. That night, watching her dance, I felt every sacrifice had been worth it. She hugged me tight and whispered, "You are the best mom in the world." Those words lingered, a balm for every hardship. I didn't know that years later they would echo back as a fragile, broken promise. Zuri grew up drifting away from the world that had shaped us. She went to college in the city thanks to a small business loan I had secured by selling my old car. She worked hard, climbed her way up, and met new people. When she returned, she was a stranger. Her voice had changed, her manner had changed, even her look had changed. She no longer called me mama, but mother. And every time I spoke, I saw the flicker of annoyance, or was it shame, on her face. At first, I thought it was my imagination, but the signs were there. The calls she didn't return, the increasingly brief visits, and the one comment she made without looking me in the eye: "I wish you had been able to get an education." Those words pierced my heart like a needle. Without realizing it, she was telling me that the love I had given was no longer enough, that the very hands that had nurtured her childhood no longer held value in her world. Even so, when she announced she was getting married, I felt a pure, innocent joy. I thought I could finally give her the gift I had dreamed of for years: her wedding gown. I offered to make it myself. She hesitated, then accepted. I took it as a sign of reconciliation, a chance to repair what distance had broken. That night, I sat before my machine and prayed before beginning. "Lord, guide my hands. Let every stitch be a blessing." I spent entire days selecting fabrics. I could afford ivory, lace, soft tulle, small pearls left by a previous client as payment. Every thread carried a wish, every fold a hidden tear. Inside the lining, where no one could see, I sewed a tiny piece of my own wedding dress, a silent message: "Take me with you, daughter. Even if you no longer see me, I will always be there." But when it was finished, and she rejected it, it wasn't just the dress she threw in the trash. She discarded my story, my love, the invisible thread that had once bound us. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat staring at the machine, now silent, thinking of my mother, who had sewn until exhaustion claimed her. She had always told me, "Daughter, women like us don't have swords or fortunes. Our strength is in our hands." In that moment, I understood. My strength wasn't in being accepted. It was in continuing to weave my own destiny, even if it unraveled repeatedly. I touched the stained gown I had retrieved from the trash, ran my fingers over its broken seams, and felt my love still beating within it. I thought of all the times I had hugged her without being hugged back, the uncomfortable silences, the mom. Please don't come dressed like that moments. And I realized humiliation, when sown with patience, could transform into a lesson. Pain doesn't destroy, it transmutes. And that transformation had already begun. Over the following days, something shifted in me. I began to sew, not for her, but for myself. Every stitch was a healing act. The thread ran smoothly, almost as if the machine understood my soul. I was no longer embroidering a gown. I was embroidering my freedom. Zuri didn't know it yet, but I already had a plan. On her wedding day, she would wear the dress she chose, but everyone would remember the one she had scorned. Some loves are forgotten, others are avenged with elegance. Mine was about to shine. The wedding day dawned under a gray sky. It wasn't raining, but the air smelled like a storm, as if the world itself sensed that something was about to break. I dressed in the only decent outfit I owned, the same one I had worn to my mother's funeral, and styled my hair carefully, not to impress, but because that day, I would face my past. With my head held high, I carefully tucked the restored gown into a white linen bag, folded with the precision of someone guarding a secret. It was neither a gift nor a complaint. It was a response, a silent answer to a daughter who had forgotten what it means to love without shame. When I stepped outside, the wind blew hard. I clutched the bag as if it were my own heart, and made my way to the bus stop. The ride to the event center was long, and at every turn of the road, memories clawed at me. Moments when Zuri and I had been one soul, laughing for no reason, hugging without fear of being seen. Now, those memories hurt more than any needle ever could. The wedding ballroom was vast, gilded columns stretching toward a ceiling that seemed to touch the sky. White lights shimmered, exotic flowers perfumed the air, and glasses sparkled on every table. Everything was perfect, perfect and empty. I paused at the door, watching people laugh, toast, and pose for photos. Zuri stood in the center, radiant in her expensive gown, a gown that, despite its price, failed to conceal the coldness in her eyes. When she saw me, her smile froze. I started forward, but a woman, likely the groom's mother, approached with a strained, polite smile that carried judgment, heavier than any words. "You must be Zuri's mother, right?" I nodded. "Ah, lovely to meet you," she said, though the warmth in her tone was absent. "Could you wait just a moment back there? We're about to start family photos." Her gaze swept over me, weighing me silently, the same unspoken judgment I had endured for years. I stepped aside, lingering near the curtains like a ghost, at my own blood celebration. During the ceremony, no one spoke to me. Some offered polite greetings, others ignored me. Zuri didn't even introduce me. That day I was not her mother. I was an inconvenient memory. The music swelled, the couple danced, applause erupted. I clapped too, but my hands trembled, not with joy, but with contained fire. I watched my daughter embrace her new husband, so confident, so haughty, as if life finally belonged to her. For a moment, I wondered if she had forgotten who had held her up when life tried to break her, who had taught her to rise, who had sewn her first dress, who had traded tears for hope. And then I realized she hadn't forgotten. She had only denied it. Sometimes love hurts so much that it is easier to bury than to acknowledge. I decided to stay, not to watch her, but to observe. I wanted to understand when my daughter had ceased to be my daughter. A bridesmaid approached me with an awkward smile. "Can I get you anything, ma'am?" "Just observing," I replied. "Observing what?" she asked, hesitant. "How a mother is forgotten," I said softly. She lowered her gaze, unsure what to say. I smiled, not with anger, but with a deep, quiet sadness that no longer sought blame. At midnight, while the guests danced and the music drowned conversation, I rose and walked to the center of the ballroom. The gown was in my hands. Eyes turned toward me. Murmurs fell silent. Zuri's face drained of color. "What are you doing, Mom?" she whispered nervously. "Please sit down," I said. "I only came to return something that belongs to me." I held up the white bag. The murmuring rose again, louder now. Some laughed, others froze. I opened the bag carefully and revealed the gown, the same one she had once called a poor person's dress, but it was no longer the same. It shone. The ballroom lights caught every crystal, each tiny stone I had embroidered by hand. The restored lace seemed woven by angels. It was a gown fit for a queen. Silence fell. Zuri stepped back, tears pooling in her eyes. For the first time in a long time, it wasn't my fault. "What is this?" she whispered, trembling. "Your dress, daughter? The one you rejected. But it's beautiful." "Yes," I said calmly. "I transformed it, just as I transformed myself." "You threw it in the trash." "But I did not. There are some things a mother never abandons, even when they are despised." The crowd held its breath. I lifted the gown high, extending it so everyone could see. "This dress was not sewn with money," I said, my voice steady, "but with sacrifice, with sleepless nights, with years I refused to give up. Every thread carries my story, every stitch bears my name." Zuri covered her face with her hands. "Mom, please stop." "No, daughter," I replied. "Stop." "No, daughter," I replied. "Stop is what I told myself every time I saw you ashamed of me. Today I did not come to complain. I came to remind you of where you come from." Applause began, tentative at first, then growing. The bridesmaids, the guests, even the groom's mother joined in. Zuri fell to her knees crying. I looked at her without pride, without resentment, only with a serenity I had never known before. I approached her, cupped her face in my hands, and whispered, "There is no shame in being humble. The shame is in forgetting who taught you to fly." She nodded through her tears. She tried to hug me, but I stepped back. "Not yet," I said. "Not until you learn what it truly means to love." I turned, holding the gown, and walked toward the door through the applause. Each step was a farewell, every glance, a stitch closing the scar she had left. As I crossed the threshold, I knew something had ended forever. I was no longer the ashamed mother who sewed in silence. I was a woman who understood that dignity too is sewn stitch by stitch. Outside, the night embraced me. The moon hung low like an old lantern, and the party lights reflected off the lace, giving the gown an almost supernatural glow. There was no music, no applause, only the quiet of a woman who had spoken her truth without shouting. I walked slowly home. Each step echoed like a final stitch, closing the wound my daughter had left. I didn't cry, I couldn't. I had cried enough for a lifetime. My heart ached, yes, but not with sorrow, with exhaustion. When I arrived, I hung the gown in front of the mirror. It was beautiful, too beautiful for contempt. But hidden inside it was something no one, not even Zuri, could see, a secret truth. Weeks before the wedding, when I rescued the dress from the trash, I didn't just restore it, I transformed it into a silent letter. Inside, the lining, between layers of tulle and lace, I sewed small handwritten notes, folded fragments of my story, of her childhood, of my soul. In one I wrote, "When you were born, I thought life had given me back what it took away. I never imagined that love could also hurt when too much is given." In another, I sewed your first dress with old fabric, but with hands full of hope. I didn't know that someday you would be ashamed of the love that sheltered you. And in the last, smallest, most secret note, I wrote my mother's words. "The thread that joins a mother and daughter is not broken. It only stretches until one of them learns to let go." I didn't know if Zori would ever find the notes, or if she would have the courage to open the dress, but I did it anyway. Sometimes words must be sown so they can blossom when silence is no longer enough. In the days after the wedding, the story spread throughout the neighborhood. Neighbors came to congratulate me, others came to pry. I listened in silence, sewing in my studio. I didn't speak, not out of shame, but because the true ending had yet to arrive. And it arrived sooner than I expected. 3 days later, Zuri appeared at my door, pale, her eyes swollen, her voice broken. "Mom, can we talk?" I froze. For a moment, I wanted to hug her, but something told me to wait. "Of course," I said calmly. She stepped inside slowly, as if fearing the house might reject her too. She sat in the chair, where she had waited countless times for me to finish sewing her uniforms, her dresses, her life. She carried the gown in her hands, and placed it on the table without looking at me. "I opened it," she said. I found your letters." The silence between us filled with her ragged breathing. For the first time, I saw her vulnerable. She was no longer the haughty woman from the wedding. She was my little girl again. "I didn't know," she whispered.